Admiral Grace Holloway had served in the human fleet for 30 years, but she had never fired a weapon in anger. No human had. For 2,000 years, humanity had lived in peace with the other species of the galaxy. They traded with them. They shared technology with them. They attended meetings at the Galactic Council and paid their membership fees on time. The other races called humans the quiet ones, or sometimes the patient ones. They were not warriors. They were not conquerors. They were simply neighbors who kept to themselves and caused no trouble. Grace was reviewing supply reports aboard her carrier, the Resolute Dawn, when everything changed. A communications officer, a young man named Kevin Price, looked up from his screen with a face that had gone completely white. "Admiral," he said, his voice shaking, "we are receiving emergency signals from New Eden Colony. The Vrethany Enforcement Fleet has entered orbit. They are taking children." Grace did not understand at first. The words did not make sense. Why would anyone take children? But as more reports came in, the terrible truth became clear. The Galactic Council had decided that human children were dangerous. They had voted to remove all human children between the ages of 4 and 12 from their families. The children would be taken to council facilities for something called cultural correction. The council believed that humans raised their young in ways that made them too aggressive, too unpredictable, too emotional. They had decided to fix this problem by raising human children themselves. On New Eden, a beautiful green world where 3 million humans lived, the nightmare was already happening. Vrethany soldiers in heavy armor marched through the streets of every city and town. They carried lists of names. They went door to door. When parents opened their doors, the soldiers pushed past them and took their children. Lavra Bennett was a teacher at a small school in the colony's capital. She was 28 years old and had dedicated her life to helping children learn. When the Vrethany soldiers came to her school, she stood in front of her classroom with her arms spread wide. "You cannot have them," she said. "These are children. They have done nothing wrong." The Vrethany commander, a tall creature with gray skin and 4 arms, looked at her with cold yellow eyes. His name was Overseer Kethrol, and he had been chosen for this mission because he was efficient and felt no sympathy for lesser species. "Step aside, human," he said. "The council has decided. Your emotional attachment to these young ones is exactly why they must be removed. You fill their minds with dangerous ideas. You teach them to love too strongly and to fight for what they love. This must be corrected." Lavra did not move. Behind her, 23 children between the ages of 6 and 11 huddled together, crying and holding each other. A little boy named Tommy clutched her leg and buried his face in her skirt. "Please," Lavra begged. "Please do not do this." Kethrol raised his weapon and shot her. The stun blast threw her across the room, and she hit the wall hard. She was unconscious before she hit the floor. The children screamed. The soldiers collected them like packages and carried them to the transport ships waiting. Outside, this scene repeated itself thousands of times across New Eden. Parents fought with their bare hands against armored soldiers. Mothers threw themselves over their children's bodies. Fathers attacked aliens twice their size with nothing but kitchen knives and farming tools. It did not matter. The Vrethany were too strong, too organized, too well armed. By the end of the day, 4,247 human children had been taken from New Eden alone. Similar operations happened on 12 other human colony worlds. The total number of children seized was over 40,000. The parents who resisted too strongly were killed. The ones who survived were left standing in empty streets, holding toys and blankets that still smelled like their children, screaming at a sky that had swallowed their babies whole. When the news reached Earth, the human homeworld People could not believe it at first. There had to be a mistake. The council would never do something so cruel. But the videos were real. The crying parents were real. The empty beds in children's rooms were real. President Marcus Lane called an emergency meeting of the human government. Representatives from every colony world attended by video link. Many of them were crying. Many of them were shouting. Some sat in stunned silence, unable to process what had happened. President Lane was 54 years old. He had gray hair and kind eyes and had spent his entire career working for peace. He had believed, truly believed, that the galaxy was becoming a better place. Now he stood at the podium and looked at the faces of his people, and he felt something he had not felt in a very long time. He felt rage. "They have taken our children," he said. His voice was quiet, but every person in the room heard him clearly. "For 2,000 years, we have been peaceful. We have followed every rule. We have signed every treaty. We have smiled at species who looked down on us, and we have turned the other cheek when they insulted us. We did this because we believed in peace. We did this because we hoped that one day they would see us as equals." He paused. The room was completely silent. "They did not see us as equals," he continued. "They saw us as weak. They saw our patience as fear. They saw our kindness as submission. And now they have stolen the most precious thing we have. They have taken our children." He looked directly into the camera that was broadcasting his words to every human being in the galaxy. "I want to speak now to the Galactic Council," he said. "I want to speak to every species that voted for this action. I want to speak to every soldier who followed these orders. You have made a terrible mistake. You thought that because we chose peace, we could not make war. You thought that because we did not fight, we could not fight. You were wrong." Admiral Grace Holloway watched the president's speech from her command chair. Around her, officers and crew members were crying openly. Some were praying. Some were simply staring at nothing, lost in shock. Her personal communicator beeped. It was a message from Fleet Command, marked with the highest priority code. She opened it and read the single line of text. "Activate Protocol Omega. The fleet wakes." Grace closed her eyes for a moment. Then she stood up and addressed her crew. "All hands," she said. "Battle stations. The war has begun." The quiet ones were quiet no more. The galaxy had always wondered about the human fleet. It was enormous. Humanity had more ships than any other species in the Council, even though they had never fought a war. The Vrethani thought it was funny. They called it the Parade Fleet because they believed humans only built ships to look impressive during ceremonies. The insect-like Cricks thought humans were simply afraid of the universe and built ships to feel safe. The Council's military experts had studied human vessels for centuries and decided they were no real threat. The ships were old designs. The humans had no combat experience. If war ever came, the experts said, humanity would fall in a matter of weeks. The experts were about to discover how wrong they were. Deep in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, far from any trade routes or Council observation stations, Admiral Grace Holloway walked through a doorway that officially did not exist. She entered a chamber carved from solid rock. And in that chamber sat the true flagship of the human fleet. It was called the Silent Fury, and it was the most powerful warship ever built by any species. The Silent Fury had never been registered with the Council. It had never appeared in any official records. It was humanity's deepest secret, built over 500 years by workers who took their knowledge to their graves. The ship was 3 kilometers long and bristled with weapons that Council scientists did not know were possible. Captain Derek Collins met Grace at the command center. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and calm brown eyes. He had trained his entire adult life for a war he hoped would never come. Now that war was here. How many ships are we activating? He asked. All of them, Grace replied. Derek's eyes widened slightly. All of them meant thousands of vessels. It meant shipyards hidden inside asteroids and moons. It meant factory worlds that had pretended to make farming equipment for centuries while actually building weapons. It meant military bases disguised as research stations, training facilities hidden inside mining operations, and soldiers who had spent their careers preparing in secret. Humanity had been playing a very long game on a moon orbiting Neptune. Commander Nicole Harper received her activation orders. She led the 14th Orbital Drop Division, a unit of ground soldiers trained to drop from space directly onto enemy targets. Her soldiers were the best of the best, chosen from millions of applicants and trained until they could fight in their sleep. None of them had ever seen real combat. All of them were ready. Nicole gathered her troops in the landing bay. They were young men and women with determined faces, wearing the black armor of the drop division. Many of them had family members among the stolen children. All of them had watched the videos from New Eden. The council thinks we have been sleeping, Nicole told them. They think 2,000 years of peace made us soft and weak. They are about to learn the truth. We were not sleeping. We were waiting. We were preparing. We were building something they cannot imagine. She looked at each face in turn. Today we stop waiting, she said. Today we go and bring our children home. The soldiers cheered. The sound echoed through the metal corridors like thunder. Meanwhile, at the Galactic Council headquarters on a station orbiting a distant star, the alien leaders were feeling quite pleased with themselves. High Councilor Zevith, the old Rathani who had proposed the child seizure, was enjoying a celebration meal with his fellow counselors. They were congratulating themselves on how smoothly the operation had gone. The humans made some noise, Zevith said, sipping a drink that cost more than most species earned in a year. But what can they do? They have no experience in war. Their fleet is old. Their soldiers are untested. This tantrum of theirs will burn itself out soon enough. The other counselors agreed. The Vrethani had been the galaxy's dominant military power for 10,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species. They had never lost a war. What could the quiet little humans possibly do against such power? At that moment, Ambassador Kyle Morrison requested an audience with the council. He was humanity's official representative, a thin man with silver hair and a face that showed no emotion. The counselors agreed to see him, expecting either surrender or begging. Kyle walked into the great chamber where the council met. Hundreds of alien faces looked down at him from their seats, arranged in a circle. He stood alone in the center, a single human surrounded by the rulers of 1,000 worlds. I am here to deliver a message from my government, Kyle said. His voice was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. You have exactly 72 standard hours to return every human child you have taken. All of them must be returned unharmed. If you do not do this, we will come for them ourselves. And we will not stop until every single child is home. Counselor Zevith laughed. The sound was ugly and full of contempt. And if we refuse? He asked. What then, Ambassador? Will you write angry letters? Will you file complaints? What exactly do you think your species can do to us? Kyle looked up at the Vrethani counselor. His eyes were cold and empty, like the space between stars. Then you will learn why we spent 2,000 years building the largest fleet in galactic history, he said. You will learn what happens when you hurt the children of a species that loves its young more than it loves peace. You will learn that patience is not weakness, and kindness is not surrender. He turned and began walking toward the door. 72 hours, he said without looking back. After that, there will be no more talking. The counselors watched him go. Some of them were still laughing. Some were starting to feel the first small seeds of doubt. Zevith waved his 4 hands dismissively. "Let them come," he said. "We will crush them like we have crushed every other species foolish enough to challenge us." 72 hours passed. The council did not return the children, and then the humans came. The human attack began at exactly 6 o'clock in the morning, Galactic Standard Time, but it did not begin in one place. It began in 17 places at the same time. The council had expected humanity to gather its fleet and attack the Vrethany homeworld directly. That was how wars were fought. You assembled your forces, you found your enemy, and you clashed in a single great battle. The winner took everything. The loser surrendered. This was how the Vrethany had won every war for 10,000 years. Humanity did not follow these rules. Human ships appeared out of nowhere in 17 different star systems. They struck military bases, supply stations, communication centers, and the facilities where human children were being held. The attacks were perfectly coordinated. Each one hit at exactly the same moment. The Council's commanders had no time to warn each other, no time to send reinforcements, no time to understand what was happening. Captain Derek Collins led the assault on Vreth Station 7. This was a massive space station orbiting a gas giant, and inside it were 800 human children waiting to be transported to correction facilities deeper in Council space. Derek's mission was simple: destroy the enemy ships, capture the station, and bring the children home. All pilots, remember your training. Derek broadcast to his squadron of fighters. We are here for the kids. Everything else does not matter. The Vrethany defenders were confident at first. They had won countless battles. Their ships were fast and powerful. Their pilots were veterans of a dozen wars. They watched the human fighters approach and prepared to teach these inexperienced newcomers what real combat looked like. The lesson lasted about 4 minutes. Then the Vrethany stopped being confident and started being terrified. Human pilots flew their ships in ways that should have been impossible. They made turns so sharp that any other species would have passed out from the force. They dove through gaps between ships that were barely wider than their own wings. They fired weapons with accuracy that Council computers said could not exist. The Vrethany pilots, trained to fight enemies who followed predictable patterns, found themselves facing chaos that seemed to have a mind of its own. How are they doing this? A Vrethany pilot screamed into his radio. Before a human missile turned his ship into fire and scrap metal dot, no one answered him. Inside the station, Commander Nicole Harper led her drop troops through the breach points. Her soldiers had blasted 7 holes through the station's hull and poured inside like water through a broken dam. They moved in perfect coordination, each team knowing exactly where to go and what to do. The Vrethany guards fought hard. They were big and strong and well-armed, but they had been trained to fight enemies who were afraid of them. They did not know how to fight enemies who seemed to feel no fear at all. Private First Class Danny Morris was only 19 years old. He had joined the military because his little sister had been taken from their home on a colony world called New Hope. She was 7 years old and loved to draw pictures of animals and flowers. The last time Danny saw her, she was crying and reaching for him as Vrethany. Soldiers carried her away. Danny had not slept more than a few hours since that day. He had trained harder than anyone in his unit. He had memorized every corridor of Vreth Station 7. He knew exactly where the children were being held. When his team reached the detention area, they found a Vrethany guard using a human girl as a shield. The guard was holding her in front of his body, his weapon pointed at the soldiers. "Drop your weapons or I will kill this one," the guard said. His voice was calm. He had done this before. Danny did not drop his weapon. Instead, he took a breath, steadied his hands, and fired a single shot through a gap in the guard's armor that was no wider than 3 centimeters. The guard fell. The little girl ran forward, crying and screaming. Danny caught her in his arms. She was perhaps 6 years old, with brown hair and big green eyes filled with tears. "I want my mommy," she sobbed into his shoulder. "I know, sweetheart," Danny said. His own eyes were wet. "We are taking you home." All across the station, similar scenes played out. Human soldiers found children huddled in cells and dormitories. They found kids who had been separated from their families for weeks, who had been told they would never see their parents again, who had started to believe that no one was coming for them. The soldiers told them the truth. Help had come. They were going home. Outside the station, the space battle was ending. The Vrethany fleet that had guarded this sector was burning. Human ships moved through the wreckage, hunting down any vessel that tried to escape. Admiral Grace Holloway watched the reports come in from her command center aboard the Silent Fury. 17 simultaneous attacks. 17 victories. Thousands of children rescued. The war was only a few hours old, and humanity was already winning. But Grace knew this was just the beginning. The Council had thousands of ships spread across the galaxy. The Vrethany homeworld was defended by the largest military force any species had ever assembled. And there were still tens of thousands of human children waiting to be saved. "Admiral," Lieutenant Kevin Price reported, "we are receiving a communication from the Crix Collective. They want to talk." Grace raised an eyebrow. The Crix were an insect-like species that had stayed neutral in Council politics for thousands of years. They were builders and engineers, not warriors. Why would they want to talk to humanity now? She accepted the call. A Crix face appeared on her screen, all compound eyes and clicking mandibles. "Admiral Holloway," the Crix said through its translator, "the Collective has been watching your species with great interest. We are impressed by what we have seen today. Very impressed. We wish to discuss the possibility of working together." Grace allowed herself a small smile. The galaxy was starting to notice. The quiet ones had found their voice, and their voice was thunder. 3 weeks after the war began, the Galactic Council was falling apart. Human forces had captured 9 of the 15 star systems where children were being held. The mighty Vrethany fleet, once considered unbeatable, had lost nearly half of its ships. 3 member species had already left the Council and declared themselves neutral. 2 more had secretly begun sending supplies to humanity. The Crix Collective had formally announced an alliance with the human government, and their massive factories were now building weapons and ships for the human war effort. But the thing that truly destroyed the Council was not the military defeats. It was the truth. Humanity had spent 2,000 years learning the secrets of every species in the galaxy. They had spies everywhere. They had listened to private conversations, read classified documents, and gathered information that powerful beings thought was hidden forever. Now they released that information for everyone to see. A video appeared on every communication network in Council space. It showed Vrethany officials discussing the real reason they had taken human children. It was not about cultural correction. It was not about making humans less aggressive or dangerous. The truth was much worse that the Vrethany had discovered that human DNA was special. Humans could adapt to almost any environment. They healed faster than other species. They could survive conditions that would kill anyone else. The Council had decided to study this ability by experimenting on human children. They planned to cut them open, test their blood, and examine their brains. When they were finished, most of the children would be dead. The video showed Council scientists coldly discussing which children would be used for which experiments. They talked about human boys and girls like they were laboratory animals, not living beings with families who loved them. When this broadcast reached the other species of the galaxy, the reaction was immediate. Species that had supported the Council began withdrawing their support. Governments that had allowed Vrethani ships to use their space closed their borders. Even some Vrethani citizens were horrified by what their leaders had planned. Councillor Zevith, watching his empire crumble around him, tried to claim the video was fake. No one believed him. Lieutenant Commander Brittany Cole led the ground assault on Facility Epsilon. This was the main research station where the experiments were supposed to happen. 2,000 children were being held there, and some of them had already been prepared for procedures. Brittany was 32 years old and had wanted to be a soldier since she was a little girl. She had trained for 15 years, rising through the ranks by being smarter, tougher, and more determined than anyone around her. She thought she was ready for anything. She was wrong. Her team fought room by room through the facility, clearing out Vrethani guards and scientists. The fighting was brutal. The enemy knew what would happen if they were captured, so they fought to the death. Brittany lost 3 soldiers in the first hour alone. She kept pushing forward. In the deepest part of the facility, she found the main laboratory. What she saw there made her stop breathing for a moment. 37 children were strapped to examination tables. Medical equipment surrounded them. Vrethani doctors in surgical gowns stood nearby, frozen in place, staring at the human soldiers who had just burst through their door. The youngest child on those tables was 5 years old, Brittany Sargent. A veteran soldier named Samuel Burke, who everyone called Sam, stood beside her. His face was pale, and his hands were shaking. "Commander," he said quietly, "what do we do with the scientists?" Brittany looked at the Vrethani doctors. They were not soldiers. They were not fighters. Her training and her orders both said to take them prisoner. Humanity needed to show the galaxy that they were better than their enemies, that they followed rules even when those rules were hard. But she was also looking at children strapped to tables. Children who were about to be cut apart by these creatures in front of her. For a long moment, she did not speak. Then she took a deep breath and made her choice. "Secure the prisoners," she said. Her voice was flat and cold. "They will stand trial for war crimes. Every single one of them will face justice." The soldiers moved forward and put restraints on the Vrethani scientists. Some of the doctors tried to protest, to explain, to justify what they had been doing. No one listened to them. Brittany walked to the nearest examination table. A little girl with blonde hair and blue eyes looked up at her with a face full of fear. Her name, according to the tag on her wrist, was Lily Patterson. She was 6 years old. "Are you going to hurt me too?" Lily asked in a tiny voice. Brittany felt her heart break into pieces. She reached down and carefully unfastened the straps holding the girl to the table. Then she lifted Lily into her arms and held her close. "No, sweetheart," she whispered. "We are never going to let anyone hurt you again. We are taking you home to your mommy and daddy." Lily started crying, but they were different tears now. They were tears of relief. On Earth, President Marcus Lane addressed the planet once more. Behind him, screens showed images of liberated children reuniting with their families. Mothers holding their babies. Fathers weeping with joy. Brothers and sisters who had thought they would never see each other again, wrapped in each other's arms. To the Galactic Council, the President said, "We offer you one final chance. Release all remaining human children immediately. Surrender everyone who was involved in this crime. Accept limits on your military power so you can never do this again. Do these things, and the war ends today. Refuse, and we will continue until there is nothing left of you but a warning to others." High Counselor Zevith sat in his bunker on the Vrethani homeworld and watched the human leader speak. Outside, human dreadnoughts were entering his home system. His fleet was scattered and broken. His allies had abandoned him. His own people were beginning to question whether he should remain in power. His advisor, A younger Vertheni named Sareth stood nearby. Perhaps, Sareth said carefully, it would be wise to negotiate. Zevith wanted to refuse. His pride screamed at him to fight to the end, to never surrender to these inferior creatures. But his survival instinct was stronger. Open a channel to the humans, he ordered. The war was almost over. Humanity had won. The Treaty of Earth was signed 6 weeks after the first shot was fired. It was called this because the signing happened on humanity's homeworld, in a great hall built specifically for the occasion. Representatives from every species in the galaxy attended. Most of them came to witness history. Some came to beg for mercy. The terms of the treaty were simple and absolute. Every human child would be returned to their families. Every official who had participated in the seizure would face trial for crimes against humanity. The Vertheni enforcement fleet would be permanently disbanded. The Galactic Council itself would be restructured, and humanity would hold permanent power to reject any decision that threatened the rights of any species. High Counselor Zevith was not present at the signing. He had been arrested by his own people 2 days earlier. After evidence showed, he had personally ordered the experimental program on human children. He would spend the rest of his life in a prison cell, surrounded by guards who were disgusted by what he had done. Ambassador Kyle Morrison signed the treaty on behalf of humanity. As he wrote his name, the hall was completely silent. Every alien in attendance understood that the galaxy had changed forever. The species they had dismissed as weak and harmless had shown them what true strength looked like. Admiral Grace Holloway did not attend the signing ceremony. She remained aboard the Silent Fury, watching from orbit as transport ships carried the last groups of children back to Earth. 40,312 children had been taken. Every single one was coming home. Captain Derek Collins found her on the observation deck, staring out at the stars. "The President wants you at the ceremony," Derek said. "You are a hero. Everyone wants to celebrate you." Grace shook her head slowly. "I do not feel like a hero," she said. "I feel tired. I feel sad. I feel angry at a galaxy that made this war necessary." "We won," Derek reminded her. "The children are safe." "Yes," Grace agreed. "But think about what we had to do to make that happen. Think about the Vertheni ships we destroyed, the soldiers we killed, the cities we threatened. We proved that we are capable of terrible violence when pushed hard enough. The galaxy will never look at us the same way again." Derek stood beside her in silence for a moment. "Is that a bad thing?" he asked finally. Grace thought about it for a long time before answering. "I do not know," she said honestly. "I hope not. I hope that what the galaxy remembers is not just our power, but our restraint. We could have destroyed the Vertheni completely. We could have burned their worlds and ended their species. We did not do that. We stopped when the children were safe. We offered mercy to those who had shown us none." She turned to face him. "That is what I want the galaxy to remember," she said. "Not that we are dangerous, but that we are dangerous and chose to be kind anyway." On Earth, the celebrations lasted for days. Families who had been torn apart were whole again. Children who had been terrified and alone were back in the arms of parents who loved them. The world had never seen such joy. Laura Bennett, the teacher who had been shot trying to protect her students, was finally released from the hospital. The stun blast had done serious damage to her nervous system, and doctors had worked for weeks to repair it. But she had survived, and now she walked out of the hospital on her own 2 feet. The first place she went was the school where she had taught. It had been rebuilt and repainted, and a new garden had been planted in front. Her students were there waiting for her, along with their parents. A little boy broke away from the crowd and ran toward her. It was Tommy, the child who had clutched her leg when the soldiers came. "Miss Lavra!" he shouted. "Miss Laura, you came back!" Lavra knelt down and hugged him so tightly that she thought her heart might burst. "Of course I came back," she said through tears. "I promised I would always protect you. I meant it." Ambassador Kyle Morrison was given a new job after the war. He was asked to lead the team that would rebuild the Galactic Council into something better. In his first speech to the Reformed Assembly, he spoke not of victory or revenge, but of responsibility. Humanity did not want this war, he told the gathered representatives. We built our ships hoping we would never need them. We trained our soldiers praying they would never have to fight. For 2,000 years, we chose peace, not because we were weak, but because we believed the galaxy could be better than it was. He paused and looked around the chamber. You took our children, he continued. You left us no choice. We came for them, and nothing in this universe could have stopped us. But notice what we did not do. We did not destroy your worlds. We did not enslave your people. We did not take revenge for every insult, every dismissal, every moment of contempt you showed us over 2 millennia. We are not conquerors. We are not monsters. We are simply a species that loves its children more than it fears war. The chamber was absolutely silent. We offer you partnership now, Kyle said. Trade, cooperation, perhaps even friendship in time. But never again make the mistake of thinking our patience is weakness. Never again presume to tell us how to raise our young. We have shown you what happens when you take something precious from us. Remember that lesson well. In the years that followed, humanity became something new in the galaxy. They were not feared exactly, but they were respected in a way they had never been before. Other species learned that humans would help them, trade with them, and work alongside them in peace. But they also learned that there were lines that could never be crossed. On New Eden, the colony world where the nightmare had begun, a memorial was built on a hillside overlooking the capital city. It was a simple structure made of white stone, with the names of every soldier who had died bringing the children home carved into its surface. At the top of the memorial, a single sentence was written in letters large enough to be seen from the city below. The sentence read, "They took our children. We brought them back. And then we built a better galaxy." Admiral Grace Holloway visited that memorial once every year, on the anniversary of the day the war ended. She would stand in silence, reading the names of the people she had sent to fight, remembering their faces and their voices and their dreams. But she also remembered the good things. She remembered children running into their parents' arms. She remembered families made whole again. She remembered a species that had come together in its darkest hour and discovered strength it did not know it had. 2,000 years of peace had not made humanity weak. It had given them something worth fighting for. And when the time came, they had fought with everything they had. The galaxy would never forget what they had seen. The quiet ones, the patient ones, the species that had caused no trouble for 20 centuries, had shown their true nature at last. They were protectors. They were parents. They were human, and they would never stop fighting for what they loved.